In this video, we're going to use a recent news story to illustrate the difference between a line chart and an XY scatter chart. This is a very common confusion when making charts in Excel, and we'll show why it's important. So if you would, pause the video, take a look at the story here, maybe even follow the link in your spreadsheet out here in column P, and take a close look at that chart and see if you can tell what's wrong with that chart. Okay, hopefully you found that the x-axis data was not in descending order. The story leads you to believe that even though they're talking about correlation without causality in the story, they fail to mention that these data are not even in descending order. We go from 35,000 up to 45,000, down to 20,000, and so on. In this last step, we're only going down by about 383 versus 15,000 evenly spaced here. And this, in a nutshell, is the purpose of this video and the difference between a line chart and an XY scatter chart. But let's use this as an example to practice some tips and tricks on building charts in Excel. First, let's recreate this Excel chart image that I've given you. This is how we do it on quizzes and exams. I create an image, you replicate it by creating a chart that looks just like it. So we could do this a couple of different ways. We could highlight some data and go up to Insert and choose our line chart. I'm going to just click on the spreadsheet and show you another way to do it. It's not as good, but we'll Alt in D1 or N1 to insert that chart the same way. We'll just have to go back later and put the chart data in. We could select different types of line charts here. We could put two different lines on the same chart next to each other to compare them. We could stack them, as we might do if we were showing how different components of something were growing or shrinking over time. Or we could do a 100% chart where we could show how the relative percentage is changing. Or we could take the first type of chart I mentioned and use markers, and that's what we'll do here. Notice it's blank. Also, I would like to get it lined up in the cell perfectly, so I'm going to click on it and say Control X, Control V, and it will line it up in the top left of that cell. That way, as we build these charts, they'll all be aligned to the left. And we can right-click and select our data. And it asks us for a line chart, what we'd like to add for this first one. I'm going to give it a series name. We won't see it on the chart yet, but I'm going to give it a series name called Global Average Temperature. And series values, I have to delete that out and then choose these, otherwise it'll stay, and say OK. And so now we have a series called Global Average Temperature. It's got Y data that we chose from column B, but its X data has not been given yet, so it just counts off the points that we gave it 1 through 7. We could choose that data by Edit and then grabbing the labels. And this is where the key difference between a line chart and an XY chart is. Whatever labels we gave it, just replace the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We could have given it days of the week or anything else, names of our best friends, and those are the things that would show up on the X data. As you can imagine, when you're trying to show correlation, that's not a very accurate way to do it. So I'm going to hit the plus sign and add some chart titles. I could type the chart title name, but I'm just going to type equal global average temperature, return, or enter, and then equal number of pirates, enter. And we're pretty close. The chart looks almost identical to the one we're trying to replicate. Somehow it picked up the name of our series as also the name of our chart, so we want to type chart 1 there. And all we need to do now is add data labels. If I click on that and right-click and add data labels, then I get some numbers on there. If I click on them and right-click and format them, then it gives me the option to grab those values from cells instead of just using the Y data for labels. So we don't want both, so I'm going to turn the value and the leader lines off. and then I'm going to place them below each individual marker. And now I think we have replicated the chart well. So we want to change it to a scatter XY chart. You could read through this, I hope you do. We could click and drag on it, or we could just copy and paste. If we click and drag, we'd hold down the control key as a quick way to copy something. And then we right click on the chart, change the chart type, and choose our XY scatter. And we could just put dots. Some data lends itself to that. We want to go ahead and connect it with straight lines. We could connect it with smooth lines, or we could connect it with straight lines. Right click, format that data series, go to the line and markers, and check that smooth box if we wanted it smooth lines. I do not like smooth lines in this case because it just looks too wavy, so I'm going to leave that unchecked. Now notice that my scale no longer matches up with what I'm trying to replicate, so I'm going to click on that once, and I could right click and format the axis. I already had the formatting window up, so it came up. The minimum I'm looking for here is 13, and notice when I tab out of that, the maximum goes to where I'd like it to be, 16.5. But if I change anything else in here, that might change as well. So I'm going to put a 0 on the end of that number and hit tab, just enough to change it so that when I hit tab, Excel says, oh, that's different than what was there before. He must want a certain number in there and not an automatic. And then besides naming the chart, I think the only thing left to do here is to fix a couple of data labels that are hard to see. A little bit hard to grab those to move them. That got one. And the other. And now we have replicated chart 2. I could start fresh with chart 3, but I'm going to copy this one. Again, I could click on it, drag it, hold down the control. See, when I don't have control, it thinks I'm moving it. When I do press control, it knows I want to copy it. And I could put it right here. That's not lined up, so I'm going to control X, control V, line it up nicely. I'll rename it as chart 3. And one of the things we're going to do here is add a data series. But before we do that, we want to change the way our number of pirates looks. We want to plot it against time instead of average temperature against number of pirates. So when I click on this, remember the series has 4 items in it. It's got the name, which we're not showing yet. Let's go ahead and show that with a legend. It's got the name of this series, which it's getting from B16. It's got the X data, which it's getting from column A. That's the number of pirates. It's got the Y data, which it's getting from column B. That's the temperature. And then it says which order would you like that in. And so this would be, let's see if I can turn that off. This would be series number 1. This would be series number 2. If I wanted to reverse those two, I could click on this one and change it to series number 1, and it would put it on the left. Also, if we were doing one of those stacked charts, the order would help with that. That allows us to change our order of those things. So what I need to get is X data that is year and Y data that is number of pirates. And so just like any other formula in Excel, we can move these boxes around with our mouse. One good use of the mouse. So we said year needs to be on the X axis. Right now the X axis is what is in column A. So I'm going to grab that box out of column A and move it over to year. And then I need to get my pirate data from column A for my Y axis. And I want the name of this chart to be number of pirates. So when I move this, I change that from B16 to A16. Now notice I don't have any data there. Why is that? It's because I set these to scale from 13 to 16, but I have tens of thousands of pirates. So I need to right click, format that axis. One thing I could do would be reset them to automatic. Another thing I could do would be scale it from 0 to 50. After we fix this, we'll see if we need to change the steps on that. I'm going to right click, format that legend and move it to the bottom. And then we are probably ready to, we need to change this label. This time I'm just going to type the word year instead of refer it to the cell. But this one's too long, so I'm going to say equal number of pirates. It's not a good idea to mix your approach on that. It would be in the spirit of one of the modeling rules if we always refer to those cells. And that way, if we corrected a spelling up there, we could correct it down here. But we can type year. We can refer this to this cell. What we need to do now is add a second series, and then we're going to end up putting it on the second y-axis. So to add a series to a chart, we can copy and paste. We have to paste in a special way. So I'm going to copy the temperature data that I'm looking for. In fact, I'm going to grab the name of that series along with the numbers. And when I copy, I want to paste special on this graph, so I could choose paste special, but it would be much smarter to do Alt HVS. Now I could add new points to the end of this blue line, but I don't want to do that. I want to add a completely new series. So we'll check new series. We could say that our values are in rows. They're not, they're in columns. It did notice that our series name was in the first row. It probably noticed that because it was text and all the other was numbers. And then we could say if we chose more than one column of data, we could specify, was the first column X data, or were all the columns just new series that we want to add. So we're ready to say OK. And now we see our new series, and 16 degrees centigrade does not plot very well on a 50,000 scale. So we're going to left click, right click, format data series, and put it on a secondary axis. If that hadn't popped up, we could click through these until we saw secondary axis. And now we're getting close. Now we have the second axis. So if we want to add a label for that one, axis titles, secondary vertical, and that one needs to be temperature. Don't know why that turned black. I believe we've replicated the chart exactly. I'm going to go ahead and play around just for fun and see what we can do with this chart. I have already come out and found an icon. That one didn't work. I went to Insert, Illustrations, Icons, did a search for skull. We're a little bit late for Halloween making this video, but I pulled that skull in. And we'll use that for it's the closest I could find to skull and crossbones, but you could go to the internet and find a PNG to paste in here for that. So let's go back to this chart, copy it, and paste it, and play around and see what we can do to make this similar. Before making this video, I went out and used an eyedropper in Paint or PowerPoint so that we could get the background color for this and format that chart area. And font color. And the font that I found that most closely matched it was called Impact. We could play around with the font size. Notice we have 2 digits shown here, but we probably want to go to our text options and make that general. We could continue to play around with some font sizes, but you get the idea. Now to get the skull to work, I had to change it to white, so I'm going to shade some cells and show you that when we change that to white, we can copy it, Control C, select the series, and hit paste. Now all we're missing is a background map, and I happen to have one that we can insert in the background. So we'll right click on the plot or on the chart area and format the plot area, because it is plot area. And then when we try to fill it in, instead of using a solid fill or a gradient, we'll use a picture. And I've already tried this, so it came up, but we would insert that from a file, choose the file, and insert it. Then we just need to get rid of some grid lines. I couldn't find a treasure map that was that color, and I'm not good enough with graphics to fix that. I guess one more thing I could do would be to remove that axis, make it not visible. And that's about as close as my time today allows us to get. I hope you've enjoyed this video, but most importantly, I hope you never confuse a line chart with an XY scatter chart.